All right. So just the two of us today. We've got Cole out again.
Just the two of us.
You and I.
You can
Um,
consider that.
but I figured since it was us and we've done more of the sober living stuff throughout the years, this could be a really good opportunity for us to just go back in time, hold hands, skip down memory lane, and figure out or talk about just starting this whole thing, starting Greenville Transitions, starting the sober living, the roughing it in the beginning, and just give people an idea of what that looked like of two guys that just had a dream of starting a program that would help other people to where we are today. And not only would it be good to share that with other people, but I think it's also going to be good for us to realize. I know I'll speak for myself here. I can often get bogged down in our like day-to-day stressors and feel like there hasn't been any growth or like everything's still just so complicated. But it's good for me to think back to day one and see like how much growth has happened and how many people have been helped. And so what do you think about that topic?
I think it's great. It's so true. Let's skip down memory lane.
All right. Only if we can hold hands.
Only if we can hold hands, fingers interlocked.
All right. So let's go back to very beginning days of like, this was just an idea. We were both living in Asheville, North Carolina. I can remember like sitting, our friend Zach, he lived in like a little townhouse condo type deal, like a 2-story condo. And we were sitting on a stoop. That's what my mind goes back to. He was out there ripping cigs and we were sitting on a stoop, concrete stoop, just talking about like, gosh, we really want to open a sober living program. Where does your head go to when you think about like first conversations?
I don't think I think of a place. I don't have any like place in my mind, I guess. Just I remember us talking about opening a mobile like donut shop. That's like the first thing. I'm just like, oh, like, would you want to start a business? Because the funny thing is, I was like, oh, I would never like work in sober living treatment, anything like that. Like, I had such disdain for it, just based on like my own experiences, like whatever. And I mean, it saved my life. So, that's just where I was at that time, was like getting out of sober living. And it was like, I don't want anything to do with this stuff. I'm going to go work construction and like be my own person. And so then I was talking about like, oh, like, doing like a business, and we're talking about like donut shop, and then it like changing to like, well, God, that'd be so cool to like open a sober living, that like putting like my money where my mouth is, of like, well, like we'll do it like the right way, and we'll do it like our way, and like fix this and not do it like that, and all these things, all these ideas we had of like not liking this, really loving that. Like that was where like I feel like wheels really got spinning for me, of like, oh, this is going to be like the coolest thing ever to get to do it that way.
Yeah, that's funny. I don't even remember the donut shop or that coming up in the very beginning.
That was like that. I mean, that was like a good bit before it, but just like, oh, like kind of the idea of even like, what would you think about like starting your own business? Because I had to like get my head around that first, because I'd never done anything really like that in any kind of serious way.
Yeah, and I think that was always intriguing to me. Like for some reason, I've always had an interest in like building stuff up, or building programs and the logistics behind it. So a little bit of backstory before we even started having that conversation. I had already started one sober living with a guy who, it was not a good partnership. We were not ready for it. I realized that early on, and it was in Asheville. I realized the partner that I'd gone into it with wasn't the right partner for me. B, I realized that I was lacking a lot of experience and knowledge that I needed to go try to gain. But I did know what I learned in that process, that I loved this. Like, I love the thought of like being able to help other people. I love the thought of building something that could be good. Like just that alone is super intriguing, fascinating to me. I can spend all my time on it, and it's fun. But I did a pivot to a landscaping company. After I left that, I was like, this isn't the right fit. So I sold out of that. I started a landscaping company with a buddy. Honestly, didn't do that for long either, maybe a year. And then I thought, gosh, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. My dad was in like the outdoor equipment industry. He sold like lawnmowers, weed eaters, chainsaws. And I know I didn't want to, I saw quickly that, nah, this isn't the path for me either. And that's when I transitioned to work for a company who had a transitional living. And I worked there for close to 4 years. And this is where I gained my knowledge and learned the industry and met you. But two, just to touch on our experience, like I went through a program, I went to treatment, and I went to like a sober living home that was a longer period of time. I spent maybe 10 to 11 months in treatment total before I broke away and got my own. I rented a home with some other sober people. You did that too. But you went through the program that I was a coach in and then managing by the time you graduated. So what did that look like for you, your whole time in that treatment period? Or treatment?
Yeah, I mean, I went to wilderness treatment when I got sober this time, and I went to that sober living afterwards, and it was the most structured sober living I'd ever been to. I'd probably only been to one before that, so I didn't have a whole lot of sober living experience. I had a lot of treatment experience, but yeah, I just remember that one standing out of like, oh my gosh, there's like phases and rules and this and that. And like the only one I'd been to before was like in a converted motel in Florida, that was just kind of like all ages. They had both genders, obviously not in the same building. Get a job day one, go to meetings, but like get a bus pass, like just figure it out, And I mean, the price reflected that. It was totally fair, but that was like my experience of sober living. So this was so different as far as like having like recovery coaches that live there, and they're providing transportation, and you have to like go through these phases that have different privileges and different responsibilities as you kind of like slowly step your way out into the world. And as much as, I mean, I hated that for like the restrictive elements of it, could look back on it and realize like that was a huge part of getting me through it, and me buying into like being with other young guys being sober, buying into sobriety, of like, oh, this is what it could look like for me. Because when I'm there with like 40-year-olds and 60-year-olds, and nothing against them at all, but you're just in such different places in life that they're like, well, I need to get back to my wife and kids and my engineering job and figure this out. And I'm thinking like, well, what the hell does my life look like sober? Because I don't have any of that. And I want to be like dating and doing fun stuff and whatever. So it was just like the perfect blueprint to have these guys ahead of me, same place as me. And then eventually, guys coming in after me, that I had this big view of the landscape of like what sobriety could look like as a 20-something-year-old.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to give anyone listening a snapshot into the experience that we're getting, because at that time you're going through a program, and I'd already been through a program, and kind of figuring out like what worked for me, what didn't work for me in the program that I went through. You're going through a program and figuring out what's working for you, what's not working for you, and getting past the program and looking back on it, because then you're, like you just mentioned, your view changes of what worked and what didn't work. And the things that you hated while you were in the program, you realize later like, oh, I actually need that. And now it makes so much sense to why they had that in place, or that they did it this way instead of that way. I think the beautiful thing for me at that time, as I like went from a coach to a manager, is now I'm seeing like the back end stuff, the inner workings of a program of like, oh, this is what a financial agreement is, and this is what policies and procedures look like, and rules and regulations. And I'm starting to see that like, it's not rocket science. Like, all of these different documents, they're, I'm reading them. It's like kind of an elementary level reading material. It's like, this is, and yeah, there are like some attorney words thrown in there, but you pick up on that stuff pretty quickly. But I would say that was the biggest shift for me, is like seeing the inner workings and realizing like, okay, we could do this. And I think that we could put a spin on it to make it better.
Well, that's like the coolest thing. And especially, I mean, you had the same experience being a resident of a sober living, but mine kind of all being within the same frame because like I went to this one sober living that you worked at. Um, and then after it, we based our sober living largely on this sober living because it was going out of business and we loved the model and we're like, this works. Um, so getting to kind of see it, you know, like when you're a guy, you're like, oh, this rule's so stupid. I don't get why it can't be like this until you're a coach. And then you're like, oh, I kind of get why it's like that because it'd be a nightmare if it wasn't. And then as a coach, you're like, oh, the managers upstairs, they just don't get how hard this is or whatever. And then you get up there and you're like, oh, I mean, I see why it has to be that way. You know, there's really just no way around it. Like I get that it sucks when you're a coach, but like, so I guess just kind of getting to continually see like further behind the scenes and like why things are the way they are. And also the things that can change where you're like, I think this thing really is just because it's always been done this way and no one's tried it this way and we're going to try it. But then now being fully on the other end of it where I have like, you know, guys coming into our sober living and they're like, this rule's dumb. It should be like this. And you're trying to explain to them like, man, like, I promise you, dude, I've fleshed all these things out to try to be like the best experience, balancing like what's good for you while also not like totally wearing you down with like excessive structure and discipline and rules and all that. And then also talking to the recovery coaches that we hire, where I'm like, you know, they're like, well, I just don't get why we have to do this or why we have to do that. And you're like, this is why. Like, so it's just so funny to like see myself kind of going through that spectrum all the way through when you're looking ahead, wondering why things have to be a way. And then somehow you're on the other end now explaining to people why they have to be a certain way and trying to be mindful of that, of like, I remember when I was this guy, you know, and like complaining about things. So like, let me be the boss or the manager or the recovery coach or whatever that I wish I had, who like took the time to explain it and was like, this is why it is the way it is, rather than just like, well, that's the rule, you know, and you just need to deal with it.
Yeah. So going back, so after we, you know, I left Four Circle, you graduated, you went to work construction, right?
Mm-hmm.
I eventually left the big treatment industry or the big company I was working for. And I honestly, looking back, I kind of feel like I had just like a summer break mentality. I feel like we were just spending our weekends hitting all the waterfalls in North Carolina, jumping off of waterfalls, swimming in rivers. There was like a snapshot of just like like I said, what felt like a summer break. And then we got to a point where rubber meets the road. Let's figure this out. Like, I feel like I kind of got you on board. You were like, okay, there is some meat to this. This could be a really good thing. And I don't remember how much time did you have and how long had you been working? Were working in construction before you put that down and you were like, okay, I'm putting all of my eggs into this basket. Let's go figure it out.
Yeah, I got sober in March of 2015. I started construction in like the fall of 2015. I know I worked it all of 2016. And I think somewhere around like the summer of 2016, like you were talking about, that was where we really started talking about it a lot. And I want to say that's even where we started taking trips down to Charleston to like look. Because I know that always sticks in my head that was like kind of a 9-month period where we were looking. And we started GT in like January of 2017 was where we like, well, January was when it was like, this is what I'm doing. I like went to my construction company and was like, hey, this is it. And I remember it was like a really big decision for me because at the same time we were talking about opening GT and like going that way, which would involve like leaving Asheville, leaving construction, whatever. That construction job was offering me an opportunity to go to Nashville and work on these like Richard Branson properties and like 10 years of guaranteed work and what would normally be a travel construction gig where you don't know where you're going. So it was like everything that I wanted in construction was opening up. I was going to be like the youngest assistant superintendent ever in that company. And I got like 2 felonies on my record for drug possession and a GED. So like, this is life clicking in a way that it had never clicked for me before. I'm going to get a company truck, company phone, huge pay raise, all this stuff. So it's like, oh, like things are finally start clicking there. And that's when that decision happened of like, or I can go do the unknown of like, go start the sober living program. But I remember that I looked at all my bosses in construction Not all of them, but some of them, and certainly the ones that were like in their 60s, 70s, stuff like that. And I was like, do I want to have their life? Because that's like the pinnacle of this. Like I can be a seasoned superintendent with 40 years experience who's like, the big guy who gets called to the job, whatever.
And how old were you at that time?
I was 26. And those guys seemed miserable. And then I was like, but sober living, like I love sobriety now and recovery. That was a crazy thought that would ever happen. But, and I don't know, like I have like a passion for what we're thinking about doing. Like I would really love that. And like the end goal of it and just everything along the way, like there was something that was really exciting about that, despite the financial security not being there, of like, oh, this could totally fail. Now I'm walking away from this thing that is kind of a guaranteed thing. So that's what was like going through my mind as we were like figuring it out and taking trips down to Charleston first, because we wanted to do Charleston Transitions and open.
Well, real quick, I just want to say that was a pretty like mature mindset to have at 26 years old, to be able to look at the people above you and say, hey, do I want my life to look like their life? I feel like a lot of people don't do that at that age.
I'd love to take credit for that, but I'm sure I'm sure I heard that somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, hey, if you're ever wondering if you're in the right field, look at like your boss's boss's boss and say like, is that the guy's, do I want his life?
Mm-hmm.
And like his personal life, because this is travel construction. So these guys, like, they're telling me about how they missed all these birthdays of their kids and their soccer practices and the big goal and whatever, because they live in, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, wherever, and they're having to travel and work in Asheville, North Carolina, and they only get to go home one weekend per month. And like family has always been something that's really important to me and that I always really wanted in my life. Like I knew that was going to be a big part of it whenever it happened. And so I don't know, that was where those things came big time into conflict of like, I don't want to have those guys' life where I miss all that.
Yeah. I didn't want to lose that thought and get too far away from it. But
no.
Charleston, we tried that for 9 months. 9 months, I can remember going and knocking on doors in Charleston and being like, hey, can we rent this house? And once we told them what we wanted to do of starting the sober living program, pretty quickly we were getting the doors shut in our face, just saying, because we were trying to be in a nicer home. The nicer homes were in nicer neighborhoods. And the people would often say like, hey, we don't want that here. We're not interested.
Not in my backyard, not by my church, not by my kid's school. And the wild thing was, and I don't know where it lands today, and I may be a little bit off on that, but I want to say that Charleston County, Berkeley County, and Dorchester County, which are like the three main counties in Charleston, had the highest overdose rates of the state. And so not only did like I have this desire to do it there because that's where I'm from, and I thought that treatment, sober living, like something like this is lacking there and could really benefit it. But also like there was a real big need just from like overdose reports and stuff like that. So it was just kind of wild, like the dissonance between those two things of like, hey, we really need programs to like come here and like help like fix this issue. But also like, basically, I feel like to sum up what we heard is go do that like 30 miles out of town, kind of in the outskirts, and then just like bust them in for meetings and jobs and stuff like that. But keep them as far away from like what we know and love here in Charleston. Again, our churches, schools, homes, neighborhoods, so that we don't have to like see it, but we'll take the help. Like we want it to benefit us. We just don't want the commitment of like it being around us, which is so crazy. And I know we said this to so many people because we're like, we're going to be the house in the neighborhood that's not doing drugs and not drinking and not stealing and has like all these rules and curfews. And like, we aim to be the best neighbors you've ever had, but like, yeah, there's going to be young 20 somethings that are like, coming in and out of the driveway and I don't know, just like moving around and being on the front porch and stuff like that. Like, but we have so much structure around it versus think about the house 3 doors down where there's a 17-year-old high schooler that lives with his parents there. And what is he doing? Is he like sneaking out and doing stuff? Is he garage hopping and stealing beer from people's, like, just the reality of like what's in your average neighborhood and what's going on, whether it's parents, kids, and everything in between versus what we were aiming to do. It was just wild that people were so judgmental of it to be like, not here.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that boils down to just people not wanting to believe that it's a problem in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
Like I refuse to believe that is going on next door to me.
Mhm.
But it is a worldwide problem. All right. So after Charleston, 9 months we spent looking there, having so much trouble. A friend of mine was like, dude, South Carolina is a big place. Open your eyes. Go look at some other cities. You know what's a cool city that's up and coming? Greenville, South Carolina. Like, just check it out. Don't, you know, don't take my word for it. Make a trip to Greenville, drive through the downtown, look at some property there. Just check it out. And I did. I took his advice, and I don't remember. Did we like? I feel like I came down and like drove through downtown Greenville, and I can't remember if you did that with me,
I think
if
you
just
did it.
came back to look at the house with me once I'd found a house.
I think you did it first. And yeah, I think you went first, and then you were like, came back up and we're like, man, like this really is something. Like it's a pretty cool city. And then I came down with you to look at it after that.
Yeah. So like I saw downtown and it was like, this is an incredible downtown. It's very charming. It's clean. It looks like young professionals here. Then I started thinking a little bit bigger than that. And I was like, this is also a great middle spot of like, hey, we're sandwiched in between Charlotte, North Carolina and Atlanta, Georgia. And we're 2 hours to Atlanta to the Delta Hub airport. And we're 2 hours to Charlotte to like the American Airlines hub airport for the Southeast. Like this could be a really good location. And Greenville, it's not so big that you feel like you're going to get swallowed up by the city. It's not too overwhelming where traffic is crazy. You know, like Atlanta can take you 2 hours to go to get through 3 exits on the interstate. So it's not like that, but then it's not so small that there's not a lot of opportunity here. So there's plenty of jobs, stuff like that. And then to top it all off, the first home we go look at, which is a nicer home, just seemed perfect. Perfect in so many ways. The location stood out to me of where it felt like you were out in the country, like you had horse pastures on both sides, but you could be downtown Greenville in 12 to 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It felt very spacious. It was like vaulted ceilings in there, open floor plan where you can see from the breakfast nook through the kitchen into the living room. And then not only that, but the guy, when we told them what we wanted to do in the house, because we wanted to rent to start out with, they were like, nah, not happening here. That's going to be, don't like the demographic that you're going to put in the house, and we don't like the wear and tear that it's probably going to put on the house. So, but this guy, we told, hey, this is what we want to. We want to be honest and upfront with you from the beginning. This is what we want to do with the house. And my recollection of the events, I feel like he just came back and he was like, hey guys, I want you to do this here. Like, I've had family members struggle with addiction. And not only can you use the house and rent the house to do what you want to do with it, but we own 67 acres here with a horse farm. We have greenhouses. You can have access to all of it. Like, use the walking trails. You can use our horses if you want. You can have access to the greenhouse if you want to grow your own vegetables. And he also had like an outdoor wedding venue on his property. And he was like, your guys could help, like volunteer with that. So it's just too many open doors there.
Yeah. And I mean, on the financial side of things, I remember places in Charleston saying, I like the one place I can think of that said yes. They said, I'll rent you this house, but you have to rent the house next door to it too. And I'm going to bump the rent up on both of them in order to like feel good about doing it. And it was just like, well, that's impossible now. So we can't do it. And this guy that we rented from in Greenville said, I'll even knock a little bit of money off the rent to make it more doable for y'all. And I think that spoke volumes to me too, of like, it just felt like, all right, we're where we're supposed to be now. And it wasn't supposed to be Charleston. It was supposed to be Greenville.
Yeah. And so then the real journey begins. I feel like, you know, we were trying to do this in the best way possible. And looking back on it, I feel like we were very, the way that we thought about it was really good, like very entrepreneurial, or like, hey, heads, we win, tails, we don't lose much. We lose just very little. We tried to minimize our risk in the beginning, but what that meant was that it was a constant grind. To where, we were living in the basement of the house that we were renting, having guys upstairs that were participants in the sober living program, not really paying ourselves a salary in the beginning. And luckily, like, we had some family support on both ends that could help us get by until this business kind of started rolling a little bit and we got more clients. But I love to talk about that because I can't tell you how many people in the years have come up to me and they're like, this just seems like a great thing to do. Like, I'm going to go start my own sober living in Charlotte, or I'm going to go start one in Maine, in this big city. And they're like, it just looks really easy. Like, you just rent a house and put guys in it, and it's pretty self-sustaining. And I'm like, no. Let me tell you about the beginning. So what are your thoughts on that? Just like those first days renting this house in Greenville.
I mean, it's crazy again for just like the things that happen to work out on your side. You happen to be dating someone who lived in Greenville. So I think that helped with like having, kind of living with her off and on, but then also at the house, like, had your stuff. And then for me, we had like one of the first people we met in Greenville was going through a tough time and needed to be like out of his house. So then we let him live at the sober living while we were getting everything set up and no guys were there and we weren't open. And so when he got back into his house, he offered me to be able to rent a room there for free. I want to say for the first like 6 or 9 months, and then for very little from then on out. And
he was also a clinician.
And he was a clinician.
We had a master's level clinician like living in the house with us.
Yes. Yeah. And talks about like maybe he'd be the therapist for GT, and that just ended up not being the right fit as we're figuring all that stuff out. So just kind of crazy, because then that became my living situation, that was like 10 minutes down the road. And I was doing a lot of the recovery coaching early on for like even the first 2 years, of like living at the house with the guys and then being off and whatever. And so, yeah, just crazy how that stuff worked out. Definitely a grind, like wild to even think about. I agree that like we're just like really safe, really calculated of just like, okay, just doing as much as we could possibly do ourselves. I mean, what you and I made like pallet furniture for the porch that's like still out there just from like pallets, and like cut it and built it and stained it all ourselves and put it up there. And I remember your mom coming and she was like by hand, like upholstering like bed sheets and cushions. And I mean, all kinds. She went like full Martha Stewart in the house and was like doing wild stuff to like help us. And it was just a crazy time of like really doing every single thing ourselves that we possibly could. And I mean, I agree with your point of like entrepreneurial, like did things the right way. The other word that stands out to me though is like naive. And certainly on my end, I don't know exactly how you felt about it, but I was just like, okay, and then we're going to open this. And everything was like building towards like opening it. Okay, we got to get this paperwork done, like whatever, get the house ready, all that stuff. And then it was finally ready. I was like, all right, I guess we like open it now. And then we did. And I just thought people would come pouring in, and the phone would be ringing off the hook with like the exact right person that fits and is what we want to do and everything, and needs what we have. And that we would just be like full in like a month. And then we'd be full like forever until you're just like, all right, I guess we'll get another house and whatever. So that's kind of a funny part that stands out to me, is like the naivety of just thinking that like if you build it, they will come, and not having any clue about like marketing or networking or business development or anything like that, which I think you were a bit more clued into. But I was like, that just didn't even make sense to me. I just thought people would come pouring in.
Yeah, I mean, part of me wanted to think that too. I would say it's 50-50. I was a little more clued in maybe on like what would need to happen for marketing and getting word out, but part of me was like hoping and holding out for people, just like the floodgates opening and coming through the doors as soon as we announced we were opening. But I mean, that's like that also every entrepreneur. It's like everyone who talks about starting their own thing, starting a business, it's like everyone thinks you're crazy until it works. And then you're a genius. And even like we had some of that of like, are we crazy? I mean, I know for a fact we had moments talking to each other like, are we doing the right thing here?
Yeah.
Luckily for us, I think so many things were falling into place that it was like, this has got to be what we need to do. This has got to be it. Like for the house to work out like this and this therapist to move in. And then we went and talked to another therapy center that was in town. Their name's Hope for Families, to partner with them for clinical work and let the guys do intensive outpatient groups there and individual therapy there. And they were like, oh, yeah, we feel so aligned with you guys. We would love to do this. Seems like a great partnership. So these things are just falling into place. I will say one of the scariest things to me was, even though I know it had to happen, but it was the marketing. Because I want to rewind here and remind you that you're 26 and I'm 27 at this time, 27 years old, starting this business. And we're going to treatment centers and walking into rooms with like a clinical director and a room full of master's level clinicians talking about how our program is going to change people's lives if you can send them to us. And I know for a fact, I know at one of them in particular, the clinical director was like, y'all are just babies. And pretty much like, thanks for the Chick-fil-A, but like, we'll catch you next time. And I'm sure in her head, she's probably thinking like their doors are going to be closed at the end of the year in 2017. And I can remember feeling that after she said that in one of our meetings, that really stuck with me and formed some insecurities within me of like, man, is this an age thing? And is no one going to take us seriously, even though we built this really good product? And this is such a silly thought, but at 27, I can remember thinking like, gosh, we just need to make it until I'm 30. And then I think I'll have more credibility. But for some reason, I was like, man, if I'm 30 years old, maybe they'll think differently about the message that I'm trying to get out to them. Did you have any like fears or insecurities around that?
I didn't until some of those things started happening. I mean, like going into it was just like, we got this. Like, by that time I was 2 years sober. So what, you were like 4 years sober. I was actually 27. So I think you would have been like 28 and then turned 29 later that year. And yeah, I remember the one where they called us babies. That was eye-opening. And then I also remember the one that we had success with, Hope for Families. It was like we were going to like outsource our therapy to them and partner with them, and they were going to do therapy for our guys in groups. So it was like a great relationship. But I remember like the first time we went to introduce ourselves to them, we were giving like backgrounds on like, who we are, where we come from, like whatever. And I was like, yeah, so like all my life I've done construction. And I remember one of them cut me off and she was like, I'm sorry, did you say all your life? What are you, like 27? And I was like, well, fair enough. I mean, it is most of my working life that I've been doing this, but I get to someone who's like 40 or 50 or whatever, you're just like, all your life? What are you talking about, kid? But I remember that was probably the one that like hurt me the most, that like stays to this day, like just taking a shower randomly one day and you're like, oh, why did I say that? So I remember having that same feeling at times of just like, oh, like, is the credibility there? But also being able to like fall back on like, I don't know, if you're a business expert, but you don't know anything about recovery, how great is the sober living? And if you're not a recovery expert, but someone who's like gotten sober yourselves at a young age and like kind of gets what works with that, at least on some level, and then you're like figuring out the business stuff to like catch up to it, I'd put my money on that second group rather than the first every day of the week. Because that's what we see, going back to your point of like the people, and I've had tons of them that say the same thing to me, that are like, well, hey man, I'm thinking about starting my own sober living. And like, what, I just rent a house and I put some guys in it and it's all good. And you're just like, oh my God, dude, it's like so much more than that. And then you start telling them like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Blah, blah, blah. And they're like, you see their eyes start to glaze over of like, oh my God, maybe I'm making a huge mistake. And I don't mean to do it to talk people out of it. You just kind of want to make sure that like you're seeing the whole picture before you jump into it, because there's a lot to it to figure out. And it's like, What are you going to do when someone relapses? What are you going to do when someone overdoses? What are you going to do if someone dies? What's the supervision look like? What's the drug testing look like? What are the rules and structure around the house? Things like just cleaning. And, you talk to someone and they're like, oh, I mean, I figured they'll just clean it on their own. It's like, not any house that I've ever seen in my life do people just clean on their own and everybody picks up and it looks like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in there where they're all putting it together and doing their part. Like, never seen it. So you're going to have some structure behind that. And if you ask them to clean and they say no, then what? Are there consequences? Like, there's just so many things to flesh out. And I love that. Like, that's how my mind works, of like that kind of programmatic stuff of like, okay, if A, then B, and if B, then C, and if C, then D. And like, what if they say no? And just having that all kind of mapped out. So that was kind of the two sides of it. I feel like you really loving like the back end, like paperwork and rules and accountability, like just that side of it, the marketing. And then I really love the like nitty gritty, like if a guy says he's not going to do his chore, what do you do with him? And kind of starting to figure out all those like game plans. I don't know where that it initially started. Oh, it was the stuff about being young.
Yeah.
So I think I always had that in me too, that I was like, but I know what I'm talking about. Like on some level, I'm not going to say I'm a 20-year sober expert, but like I'm a young guy who just got sober as a young guy and is like making it work. So I'm like really connected to young guys, because if I'm 60 and I'm like, hey man, I got sober when I was 25 too, how many like 21-year-olds are going to look at me and really hear what I have to say? Maybe some, but when you're like 27 and you're like, I got sober when I was 25 just 2 years ago, I don't know, there's something that kind of connects you a bit more there, where they're like, oh, this guy kind of gets it. Maybe.
Yeah. No, and I remember that. Like, we were kind of banking on that being our biggest selling feature in the beginning of like, oh, well, like, where would younger guys want to go? They'd rather go to a place that has younger guys operating it. Like, to them, maybe they could look up to us in some way. And I can remember saying to you earlier on, like, but at some point we are going to get older and we're going to become the people that they're like, why is this old man telling me what to do? Like, kick rocks, bro.
And then that happened.
Yeah.
Every year I'm like more and more reminded of that when guys start to call you sir. When I get called Mr. Lucas. Yeah, when I like make some joke and like they all look at me like I'm just the cringiest guy ever, of like, who let this guy in here?
Get out of here, dad.
Yeah, dude, for real. Like, and then you're just like, man, I am slowly losing touch with some of that. But still like feel it, and still can very much connect to like what it was like to be 25 and sober and in a sober living. So you kind of remind them through experiences and hanging out that you're not as different as it seems.
Yeah. So, I mean, by the first year or two of operating with sober living, and you're much better with the numbers on this and just the memory, but like what we paid ourselves maybe $15,000.
The first year, largely the first year was nothing.
Yeah. For 2017. So from March to the end of the year.
Yeah. I want to say most of that was nothing.
Like nothing. And then the next year, I think it was 15,000.
It was somewhere between 15 and 18,000.
Which was like enough for us to like buy groceries and some gas.
Pretty much. And like pay my like $500 rent bill. That was like everything included, living with that guy that I was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was still very much like barely getting by. So despite feeling successful in the sense of like, we actually have guys living in the house and like enough that like pay the rent and like the business expenses and stuff, we still had not experienced any kind of like personal reciprocation for like our efforts going into it of like, oh, like I can afford a car payment, or like, I don't know, like, yeah, anything beyond like bare essentials, groceries and gas. I mean, I remember on my off shifts when I'd have like 3 days off, I would order 2 pizzas, which I think I got like a $10 each deal. So it was like $20. And then I would eat those 2 pizzas for 3 days. I think I could have like 2 slices per meal. Like I had it all figured out. And that was how I could eat on like for 3 days on $20 until I got back onto shift coaching at the house, where then we provide groceries in our program. So then I would eat that food for free. So like there were so many little ways that I could just kind of like barely get by.
Yeah. Good thing our metabolism was so high back in those days.
Yeah. 6 slices of pizza a day.
Yeah. So yeah, we're paying ourselves nothing. Even the third year, I mean, maybe it went up to 20 or 25,000 a year salary is what we paid ourselves, but it was still like it's a grind. We were struggling. But we were also dumping more into the business to grow it, of like, oh, we can get like a QuickBooks membership now, and like, oh, we can maybe afford this accountant now to help us with our taxes. And, so we are slowly gaining services that could help grow the business, which was another, I think, smart move on our part, is just like, let's just keep putting it back into the business. To hopefully help us grow. So
Funny things like that though, like my family friends that donated the pool table.
yeah,
But like one of the things we got for the guys was a ping pong table with early money while we were not really paying ourselves, but we were like, I think the guys will really like this and appreciate it. I remember it's my godfather, but his wife is like basically like a bonus godmother too. And I remember like every year for years, they would send like $100 or $200 for my birthday, but write it to Greenville Transitions. And that would be like a new toilet seat or a bookshelf. I mean, it was just like all these little like wins in these tiny little areas that kind of added up to like make it work.
yeah. My mom's church was writing us like sending yearly donations to us to keep us afloat. Yeah.
And like the grind attitude, I feel like was what like kept us afloat, of like, we're not going to pay ourselves more money until like it's absolutely makes sense and it's not going to hurt this business in any kind of way. But then I feel like all those little things like kind of got us by on the like, we need a new bookshelf. What are we going to do? Oh, boom, we got that. We'll get a new bookshelf. Oh, we need a new toilet seat. This one's like breaking off. Oh, boom, that came in. We'll get a new toilet seat. So like we're like improving the house, the program, the vibes, like the experience of everyone, with all those little things helping us get by.
Mm-hmm. And so we're starting the sober living for 4 years, probably. We start that in 2017, and we're doing all of the life skills, the housing stuff, the 12-step programming on our side, but then we're outsourcing all of the clinical work. So any therapy, psychiatry, we went and partnered with people in the Greenville community to provide that. So the guys were participating in, like, it's called an intensive outpatient program, which are groups that they would go to and receive therapy in a group setting. Then they every week would have an individual session with a therapist. So they'd have their one-on-one for an hour long with a clinician. We had access to a psychiatrist in the Greenville area that we partnered with that could do all of our medication management for guys in the house. So any clinical, medical stuff, all outsourced. And we even went through a couple of those. We started with Hope for Families, great partnership, but we got to a place where they were making some changes on their end to their business model. They were going a little more online model, and maybe cutting group hours some, or changing up their days to where it just didn't work with our schedule as much. So then we pivoted to Pavilion, had an outpatient in Greenville, South Carolina, even though they were based in North Carolina. And so they let us partner with them for a while for their therapy. And eventually we realized that, like, hey, it's really hard. I think this was my take on it, and you can share yours, but my take was like, it's really hard to work the schedule around another clinical office and their schedule, because they also have their people in the community that they're seeing and tending to. So our guys, it's not like they took a back seat, but they certainly had to like look at the bigger picture of their community people. Oh, and here are the Greenville Transitions guys over here. How do we plug them in? And I can remember like the groups getting complicated to get guys to, the individual sessions being complicated. We're providing transportation to them. We didn't have enough staff to come like 6 times, a day at different parts in the day while these guys are going to work. And it became very important to me to figure out, like, okay, how do we bring this in-house? Like, how do we get this to where like we can manage all the schedule, the therapy, the psychiatry, the housing, logistics of jobs and meetings and stuff? Would you say that is an accurate representation, or?
Yeah, pretty accurate. The only details I would add is that wanting to lower costs for the families that we were working with, we looked into how could we bill insurance for clinical services, whether that's groups or individual. because if they could use their insurance, then it would reduce the overall cost of the program, rather than the place that we first partnered with was strictly like private pay, which there's nothing wrong with, but families had to pay that private pay out of pocket, and sober living insurance isn't going to touch out of pocket. So we were just this big cash pay program. And so we thought, okay, if we partner with another program that could use, could take insurance, maybe we could lower the overall cost of our program for families and like make it more accessible. And so then this is my idea of the unmanageability. Then we were using both of those programs. So we were kind of between them. And we were using, the private pay one, if there were guys that were referred to us from them, because they had a national reach. So they would get guys from Idaho and New York and Minnesota, whoever, and say, oh, go to this sober living, and then you can use our clinical services. And so it was like a great partnership in that way. So we still kept some of those guys there, but then we had other guys go into the new one we were partnered with.
I totally forgot about that.
And then the cherry on top was COVID. What happened. And that was where we were like, oh my God, like we have zero control, because everyone shut stuff down and they said, we're going for Zoom for all groups. And of course, in the beginning, like that made a ton of sense and everyone was scared, but you get to be like a year out and like, we can't run a program where these guys are doing all their therapy on Zoom, and we're trying to get them connection and like real life connection. And there were just so many hurdles and fights there to like maintain like the ethos of what our program is supposed to be in a prime way, like connection. And then everything's online and they need to be locked down at the house and all that. So I feel like that was the big eye opener, where when one of those groups was like, we're not starting back in-person groups like for the foreseeable future. And the other one, I think, was starting them back. But again, some of the schedule stuff and like, oh, we got to get this guy here. Everything just got so complicated. And I think we felt so out of control of like it being the way we wanted it to be, that was where I feel like the idea was born out of like, what if we started our own therapy center where we provided the therapy, we provided the groups, and like we did this ourselves. And that way we could have more control over like the schedule, and everything matches for the house. Because you can't ask another program to say like, hey, can you shift your group schedules and your therapy schedules to like benefit us, who are like 1/3 of your customers, to the exclusion of the other 2/3 that are just community people, or not just, but they're community people and important too, and their schedules matter as well. So they have to do the best thing for all these pieces. And we wanted to make something that was just the best thing for us.
Yeah. So then 4 years later, after opening three guys opening a sober living house, and that's all they're doing. 4 years later, in the height of COVID, we opened the clinical office, which is bringing therapy and psychiatry in-house and doing it all under one roof.
That was where the plotting and the scheming started. Was it? No, not actually, but that's where we started planning it, which again was like 9 months, almost a year of planning from when we started talking about it to like actually opening doors. So same thing as the sober living, like all this time, all this energy, all this effort went into it in the peak of COVID, which gave us plenty of time to figure stuff out to then do it.
Yeah. Well, we had a planning period, but then we had like an office build out. So we had to wait months for that to happen. And while that was happening, there was a lot of legwork going into the paperwork that had to come with the clinical office. And I spent some time building furniture for it, which was partly just therapeutic for me. So like, as chaotic as it was, to like try to get it off the ground and figure out the policies and procedures and financial agreements, all that kind of stuff, I needed something to ground me a little bit.
Yeah, you got into woodworking and got so into it that I feel like at any given time in there, you might start talking about making a wooden toilet and a wooden sink and I don't know, all wooden walls. Like you were all about wood, and we have so much cool wood furniture in there thanks to that. But it was funny, just like your mind going of like, what else could I make? Can we make a wooden couch?
Yeah.
Can I make a wooden light? Can I?
Ties back to the first days of the sober living house, where we're making pallet furniture for the patio.
Hey, your furniture looks a lot better than the pallet furniture, but
dude, we got to give that thing props though. I mean, it is still rocking today. And how many pieces of other pieces of furniture have we had to trade out in the, how many years now? 8 years
8 years.
that thing is just surpassed.
Yeah, because it's just pallets.
Like,
Pallets with cushions on them, but it's outdoor furniture, and that makes it even harder to last. But if anyone's looking for some good outdoor furniture that will last a long time, build you some pallet furniture. It'll stand up.
Yeah, that stuff's been great. Well, yeah, man, we've certainly had some. It's been a roller coaster.
And that's where we met Cole. And we met Cole in that first outpatient therapy center. He was a therapist there. Then he went to go do his own private practice thing. And when we were thinking about like, all right, you're not a therapist, I'm not a therapist, we got to have some therapist that's going to like kind of head up the therapy side of this thing that we're endeavoring to do. Who the hell is it going to be, like in the Greenville area? And that's where Cole came to mind and was like, oh my God, this guy's like perfect for us to partner with, like on this side of things, and then build all that out. And Cole's been a dream on that side, and just being aligned in like values and mission and everything of like, we're working with young guys. So we have to reach young guys in a way young guys like to be reached, which is like physical and doing stuff and more activity based. And that was another thing with us starting the therapy center, is that we wanted it to be more adventure based and just more catered towards, especially like kind of main daytime programming for our sober living, like be catered to what those guys are going to benefit the most from. And we didn't think that was 3-hour groups in an office. And we thought it'd be good to break it up with a UFC gym partnership and parks and
Rock climbing gym partnership.
yeah, more like physical active stuff mixed in with groups. So it was more experiential. And so far that's been like, we're on the money on that guess of that's what young guys would like.
Yeah.
More than just the other type of programming. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but just, yeah.
Yeah. But the office was everything, the sober living was a huge learning curve. It felt like we were kind of building a plane as we were riding in it, and just trying to make sure all of the pieces are on and where they need to be. And I would say the same for the office as we were building the clinical program. But it's one of the more eye-opening things for me is just, before when we were outsourcing all of the clinical work, even the insurance side, I still wasn't that involved in insurance. But then opening our own and being a little more involved in it and how it works and the inner workings of verification of benefits and deductibles and out of pockets, and just made me realize how nasty and twisted that whole world is. And there were several times where we were like, oh yeah, and eventually we'll become an in-network facility and we'll sign contracts with all of these insurance carriers. But then I think quickly realized that did not align with our values and what we were trying to build as a program.
Yeah, for sure. But that was definitely the idea up front, because that's just what you hear that people do. People say you start a therapy center, you go and network with everybody, and you just build, grow out. And that's what going in network, I think, kind of forces you to do. So if that's what you're trying to do, that lines up. But we wanted to have like more of a niche, very tailored, like thoughtful experience with smaller groups that could really cater to like more individual needs, and not have to be 30 people in groups day in, day out, 2 different facilities, and just like growing like crazy because of that.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
Another crazy thing that I'm kind of proud of is that our prices for sober living have not gone up in 8 years. And if you go back, I saw someone doing this the other day where they like, and God knows how you do this, but maybe you could, because you're the receipt guy and the bookkeeper. But someone went back to like 2020 even, and they found a Walmart receipt from their groceries, and then they made like an online Walmart cart and just started adding all the exact same items to see how far the difference would be in price. And it was like crazy different. And so then I think go back to 2017, even before COVID, like what groceries cost us to get. And that's way more now. And what gasoline cost. And I'm sure that's gone up and down. And, we've paid coaches more and more. And like all these costs have gone up over time. with inflation and tariffs and COVID and all this kind of stuff. And we've maintained the same price all the way through on the sober living.
Yeah, but let's go back. Let's skip down memory lane to a receipt.
Did you find a receipt from 2017?
I'm going to 2020. Advantage store, that would be an Ingles. Grocery receipt is $144.10. And that got us a bunch of ground chuck, smoked ham, a pound of bacon, a tinfoil pasta pan. Burritos, enchilada sauce. I mean, this is let's just say ground beef. Ground chuck was $3.19 a pound. I don't know what it is now, but
I think it's closer to $5.
Yeah. Cookies and cream, ice cream, fresh guacamole. Yeah, Joey was in the house. You got chips and fresh guac on here.
Yeah, that's a favorite.
Yeah, this would be interesting to go back and look through the receipts from 5 and 7 years ago.
Yeah, if you could find one from 2017, that would be interesting. But costs have constantly been going up, especially for a lot of our like core expenses. And we still cost the same that we did in 2017 when we were a 26 and 27-year-old opening up and not having any idea other than, and again, I like to say this too, because I think people can complain about price of sober living. And we certainly didn't say we want to cost X amount of dollars. Okay, now how do we justify that with services? We came at it from how do we make the best sober living that best supports guys? Okay, it would take this, it would take that. We got to have this part of it. This has got to be some of it. It needs to be in a house that looks like this with beds that look like that and food from this store. And all we figured all that out first. And then we tallied it up and we're like, okay, so how much does this program need to cost to make that work? And so I think for just people to understand that we came at it first and foremost from what's the best thing for the guy. And then the afterthought was, okay, that makes it X amount of dollars per month. And I know that that's out of some people's budget and just not doable. But that's where we're coming from with it.
Yeah. And I would make the same argument for the clinical side of it, of like, because they're two separate payments. You have a payment for the housing side, but then there's payment on the clinical side. And I've had people be like, why would you dare? How could you not go in network? Why would you stay in an out of network facility to where people can't afford or like use their insurance to pay for your product? And it's just like, hey, we're all good for the in-network facilities, good for them. I love the fact that they can reach more people, but it's just not what we wanted to sign up for. We wanted to be a very niche program that wasn't based around volume, which is what you become. When you go in network, you become a volume facility and you need to take as many people and all people as you can. And our belief is that, no, if we focus on a certain group, we can better serve that group. So if we just focus on young men who struggle with substance use disorder and also struggle with failure to launch, we can serve them better if like we hyper focus on their needs versus like, we'll take anyone, male, female, 17, 84, doesn't matter. Come to us. You're on an oxygen tank. Who cares? We got a bedroom for you. No, we're a very niche program. And like, we believe that like we do better when we focus on that. So I think there's a good argument for both there, and both need to exist.
Yeah,
right. They both need to exist. Just the way you want the discount restaurant where you can go get any meal made, and then you want the very niche high like Italian restaurant that serves the best pasta in town, but that's all they do is pasta.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I mean, the frustrating thing with a lot of those. Some of the people who get frustrated is just trying to explain to them that like, they're like, oh, I came to see y'all because y'all are smaller and There's like not so many groups, and I just like the feel and the vibe of it and you guys and all that. And it's like, well, that's because we're not like a mega corporation that's in network with everybody. So then to be frustrated that we're not that, it's like, if we were that, you wouldn't have ever been drawn to us in the first place. And same thing on the sober living, where it's like, oh my God, I love everything you do. And then you tell them the price and they're like, I hate that. And you're like, but that's what makes everything that you loved hearing about work, you know? They're like, I love that you have 24/7 recovery coaches that are there for my son whenever, you know, he needs anything. And it's like, well, yeah, that costs a lot of money to pay those people. That's like a very specific tailored job that not a lot of people want to do also. So it's like tough to even staff that, let alone pay them enough, you know, and then probably be a little crazy enough to want to do that. So that's always a frustrating part, trying to convey that to the people that we work with or that call up, of like, you don't get one without the other. You can't have all this stuff without that cost. And you can't have a therapy center that looks like ours, I think, while being in network with everyone. They just don't exist.
Yeah. Well, this was a long one. I think we're over an hour now. So is there any like other really important detail that we left out that you want to throw in before we end it, or?
No, I think those are the big ones. And I just say to anyone who's thinking about starting a program, opening one up, my biggest things would be to like check your intentions, because this is not something that you make a ton of money doing. I think you really got to have like the right like heart for it and like mission for it. And it's going to take a lot of time to build, and it may not be as simple as it looks from the outside looking in. And that doesn't make it not doable. You just got to figure stuff out. And as much stuff as I was saying in the beginning that like, I don't know, that was all stuff we had to figure out, right? Like, it wasn't like we came into it like, oh, what are you going to do for chores and this and that? Like, that was all trial by fire of like, never had a guy say that before. What is a rule going to be around that? I mean, I tell guys when they come in, I'm like, any rule you see in this program that seems like oddly specific and like maybe kind of weird is probably because somebody made the need for that rule at some point in the past 8 years. And it was just something that like, okay, I guess we have to have a rule around that. So there's just so much trial by fire with it. You got to learn, like you said, you're building a plane while you're flying it. Can be frustrating, but it's also so rewarding and insane to me that we're like, I'm talking to you on a computer screen 8 years later, like feels crazy to me from where we started out.
Yeah. No, it's wild. And it's easy to forget, for me at least, like how far we've come with the program from walking into a lot of rooms with clinical directors and clinicians being like, these guys are going to be closed next week.
Mm-hmm.
Now, well, cool. I feel like that was a good episode.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to end it right there.